My grocery bag slipped from my arms and hit the pavement when I saw it. The sound of glass breaking inside one of the bags barely registered over the roaring in my ears. My parking spot. The one with my name painted on the curb in white block letters. Letters my father had carefully stenciled himself just months before he died. And parked across it, crooked, careless, like he owned the asphalt, was Colton Reeves's massive black SUV. He leaned against the hood like he'd been waiting for me to arrive. Arms crossed. That smile on his face, the one that said he knew exactly what he was doing and didn't care. My sister stood beside him, laughing at something on her phone. She glanced up when she heard my bags hit the ground. I felt my throat tighten as I pointed at the painted letters underneath his front tire. Colton, that's my spot. He jingled his keys slowly, deliberately. The sound carried across the quiet parking lot. Relax, Paige, he said, his voice dripping with casual dismissal. Family doesn't need reserved parking. We can share. My chest burned. The small plaque with my name on it, the one Dad had mounted on the brick wall next to the space, sat directly in my line of sight, right under Colton's smirking face. The one my father installed 2 weeks before the heart attack that killed him. My sister rolled her eyes, not even bothering to look up from her phone. Paige, seriously, it's just a parking space. You're being dramatic. Just a parking space. I stood there shaking while they walked inside like I didn't exist, like I was invisible, like my father's last gift to me meant nothing. And that was the moment everything changed. Not dramatically. Not with shouting or tears, just a quiet click inside my chest. Something settling into place. He took my reserved spot every day, until I took his car as collateral. My name is Paige Whitaker, and that parking space was the last thing my father ever gave me. Not the most expensive thing, not the most valuable, but the most meaningful. Because it represented every Saturday morning we'd spent together, maintaining this building. Every pipe I'd helped him replace. Every wall I'd painted while my sister was out shopping or my brother was traveling. Dad built this 12-unit apartment building with his bare hands over 20 years ago. 3 floors of solid brick and careful craftsmanship. Every detail thought through, every corner finished properly. And one reserved parking space, right by the entrance. Close enough to carry heavy groceries, sheltered by the building's overhang when it rained. Mine. With my name painted in those careful white letters, I bent down to pick up my groceries, glass crunching under my shoes. As I gathered the broken jar of pasta sauce, I stared at the SUV and realized something terrifying. This wasn't the first time Colton had parked there. I'd seen his car in my spot twice last week, once the week before. I'd just been too polite to say anything. Too worried about keeping the peace, like Dad always tried to do. But Dad wasn't here anymore. My name is Paige Whitaker, and my father built this apartment building with his bare hands. Literally, he was a contractor by trade, but this building was his passion project. His legacy. 12 units, 3 floors. Solid construction that had weathered 2 decades of storms without a single major repair. And 1 reserved parking space that he'd painted with my name 2 weeks before the heart attack took him. Not because I was special, not because I was his favorite. Because I was the only one who'd worked beside him, fixing burst pipes at midnight and painting hallways on weekends, when everyone else was too busy living their own lives. My sister never cared about the building. She'd complain when Dad asked her to help, always had somewhere else to be. My brother had moved 3 states away the day after college graduation, but I stayed. Learned how to read building codes, how to fix a leaking faucet, how to deal with difficult tenants without losing your temper. Dad left the building to all 3 of us in his will, equal shares, because that's who he was, fair to a fault. But he left the management to me. In writing, notarized, legal. 2 weeks after the funeral, my sister moved in with Colton. Rent-free, she'd assumed. Family privilege. I hadn't had the heart to argue. Not then. Not while we were all still grieving. That was 4 months ago. And I was still letting things slide. Still trying to honor Dad's memory by keeping the family together. But Colton had just crossed a line. Colton walked through the building like he owned it from the moment my sister brought him home. Loud voice that carried through the hallways. Expensive watch that he checked constantly. Designer clothes that seemed out of place in our modest building. and that massive black SUV that barely fit in the parking lot. The first time he parked in my space, I'd been loading groceries from my car. I'd come back out to move it into my spot and found his SUV there instead. When I asked him about it later, he'd shrugged. Didn't see the sign, my bad. But the sign was impossible to miss. White letters on dark pavement and the plaque on the wall right next to it. The second time, 2 weeks later, he'd smirked when I mentioned it. Oh yeah, forgot. I'll move it later. He hadn't moved it. I'd parked 3 blocks away and walked back. The third time was today, and this time he'd been waiting, standing by the SUV like he wanted me to see him there, wanted me to know he was doing it on purpose. And my sister had laughed, actually laughed, like my parking space was some kind of joke, like the last thing Dad gave me was meaningless. I carried my groceries up to my apartment, the 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor that I'd lived in since Dad converted the building from commercial to residential. The pasta sauce had broken, leaving red stains on the other groceries. I cleaned up the mess mechanically, my mind somewhere else, processing what had just happened. Colton wasn't just parking in my spot. He was claiming territory, establishing dominance, and my family was letting him. I brought it up at Sunday dinner the following week. The whole family gathered at my aunt's house like we did every month. My sister, my brother who'd flown in for the weekend, my aunt and uncle, a few cousins. I need my parking spot kept clear, I said calmly, between the salad and main course. Tried to keep my voice neutral, non-accusatory. My sister sighed dramatically, setting down her fork. Paige, stop acting like a landlord, we're family. My aunt chuckled from across the table. It's just parking, honey. Surely you can share. Colton leaned back in his chair, completely comfortable. Exactly. Relax. We're all family here. Family. The word everyone kept using like a shield, like it meant I wasn't allowed to have boundaries or expectations. I looked around the table, saw the dismissal on their faces, the way they'd already decided I was being unreasonable. My uncle, Dad's brother, muttered something under his breath. Quiet, but not quiet enough. He probably does it because he knows she won't do anything about it. The table laughed. Not mean-spirited, not cruel, just casual. Like it was obvious. Like everyone knew I was too passive, too accommodating, too much like Dad had been. Everyone laughed except me. I sat there feeling something cold settle in my stomach, a realization clicking into place. They didn't just think Colton could take my space, they thought I was too weak to stop him. The next morning, his SUV was there again, parked diagonally across my painted letters like a middle finger rendered in German engineering. Day after day after day. SUV in my spot, every single morning. Sometimes straight, sometimes crooked, always there. I started parking 3 blocks away and walking back past the sign with my name on it. Past the plaque Dad had mounted. Past Colton's smug vehicle. Tenants noticed. Of course they noticed. In a 12-unit building, everyone sees everything. One of them, Mrs. Kowalski from 2B, an elderly woman who'd lived here since Dad first opened the building, asked me quietly one morning as I walked past. Isn't that space supposed to be yours, dear? I remember your father painting those letters. I forced a smile, tried to make my voice light. Yeah, family stuff. It's complicated. She'd looked at me with something like pity. Sympathy. The kind of look that made my stomach churn because it meant she could see what I'd been trying to hide, that I was letting someone walk all over me, in my own building, in the space my dead father had designated as mine. I started avoiding the parking lot during busy hours. Started timing my exits and entrances to minimize the chance of running into Colton or my sister. Started feeling like a stranger in the building I was supposed to be managing. Then I saw something in the lease records that made my stomach twist. I'd been going through the files in Dad's old office, the small room on the ground floor that still smelled like his cologne and coffee. Rent ledger for Unit 3A. Colton and my sister's apartment. 2 months of missed payments. No rent received since they'd moved in. My father used to let family slide on rent. I knew that. He'd cover the gaps himself rather than ask them for money. It was just how he operated. Family came first, always. But now the ledger showed the truth in black and white. They owed more than $2,000, and the building's operating account was running lower than it should be because of those gaps. Dad had been subsidizing their living expenses. Now he was gone, and they just Assumed it would continue? I sat there staring at the numbers, my mind racing. This was worse than the parking space. This was actual theft, taking advantage of my grief and my reluctance to rock the boat. I heard voices in the hallway outside the office, tenants talking. Then Colton's voice, loud and confident. "She doesn't actually run this place," he was saying casually. "I do. Paige is just keeping the seat warm until we figure out the real management structure." My blood turned to ice. I stood up and moved closer to the door, listening. A tenant, I recognized Mr. Allen's voice from 1C, responded. "Oh, I didn't realize. I thought Paige was in charge." "Nah," Colton said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "She's too soft for this. Building needs someone who understands business." The tenant had nodded. I'd watched through the crack in the office door as Mr. Payday Allen's expression shifted, accepting Colton's version of reality. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. This wasn't even just about unpaid rent. Colton was systematically undermining my authority, telling tenants I wasn't really in charge, parking in my space to demonstrate that I couldn't enforce even the simplest rules. And tenants were starting to believe him. Mrs. Kowalski had started directing her maintenance requests to my sister instead of me. Mr. Allen had knocked on their door last week to complain about noise instead of coming to me. My own building. My responsibility according to Dad's will, and I was losing control of it because I'd been too afraid to assert myself. I'd been trying to honor Dad's memory by keeping the peace, by not making waves, by being understanding and flexible. But Dad had also taught me about boundaries, about standing up for yourself, about not letting people take advantage. I just hadn't been listening to that part of his lesson. I went back to his desk, now my desk, and pulled out the property management binder. Every lease agreement, every rule, every clause and provision. I read through the building policies Dad had established, the ones I'd helped him write. Clear, specific, not negotiable. One section made my pulse quicken. Reserved parking spaces are assigned by management and must be kept clear. Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. Another, rent is due by the 1st of each month. Late payments after the 5th incur a $50 daily fee. Unpaid rent exceeding 2 months is grounds for lease termination. My father's office felt different as I sat there reading those policies. The same wood desk, the same filing cabinets, the same photographs on the wall of the building under construction 20 years ago. But something had shifted in me. A clarity settling over the grief and confusion. Every document had my name on the management transfer. Legal, signed, witnessed, not ambiguous, not temporary. This building was mine to run. Dad had made that explicitly clear in his will. And I had been letting Colton pretend otherwise. Letting him tell tenants he was in charge. Letting him park wherever he wanted. Letting him live rent-free while I scraped together money for building maintenance. I'd been so focused on not wanting to seem like the mean landlord that I'd forgotten. I wasn't a landlord. I was the building manager. The person responsible for keeping this place running. And part of that responsibility meant enforcing rules, including rules about parking. I pulled out my laptop and opened a template for violation notices, something Dad had created years ago for dealing with parking issues. Typed in Colton's information, the violation, the date, the required remedy. Printed it on official building letterhead. That was the moment I stopped trying to keep the peace. The moment I decided Dad's legacy deserved better than my cowardice. I walked outside and taped the notice to Colton's windshield while it was still parked in my spot. Official, professional, clear. This vehicle is parked in a reserved space. Please relocate immediately. Future violations may result in towing. Colton laughed when he saw the notice. Actually laughed out loud. I was coming back from checking the mail when he walked up to his SUV and spotted the paper under his windshield wiper. He pulled it off, read it, and looked around until he spotted me standing by the entrance. "You're serious?" he called across the parking lot. "A parking ticket? Really, Paige?" "It's a violation notice," I said calmly. "The space is reserved. It's clearly marked." He crumpled the paper and tossed it on the ground. Right there on the asphalt, 2 feet from a trash can. "Relax, Paige. You're making this a bigger deal than it is." I didn't respond, just watched him get in his SUV and drive away. Watched him leave the crumpled notice lying on the ground like trash. After he was gone, I walked over and picked it up, smoothed it out, added it to a folder I'd started keeping. Documentation. That night, my sister showed up at my apartment door. I heard her knocking hard, insistent. Opened it to find her standing there with her arms crossed and fury in her eyes. "You embarrassed him," she snapped before I could even say hello. "That stupid parking notice, in front of the whole building." "He's parked in my spot," I said quietly. "The one Dad designated for me." Her face twisted into something ugly. "You're turning into Dad, obsessed with rules and control. That's exactly what killed him, you know? Stress over this stupid building." The accusation hung in the air between us. That Dad's heart attack was somehow the building's fault. That caring about something was the same as being destroyed by it. "That was supposed to be an insult," I said, "comparing me to Dad." She blinked, confused. "But it's not," I continued. "Dad built something worth protecting, something worth standing up for. If that's what killed him, at least he died defending something that mattered." My sister's expression shifted. Less certain now. "You're really gonna fight over a parking space? That's the hill you want to die on?" "It's not about the parking space," I said. "It's about respect, about honoring what Dad built, about not letting someone take advantage just because they're dating you." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. For a second, I thought she might actually hear me, might understand. Instead, she turned and walked away. "You're making a mistake," she called back over her shoulder. I closed my door and stood there, heart pounding, hands shaking slightly from the confrontation, but something inside me had steadied, a resolve forming. The next morning, Colton's SUV was parked in my spot again. Blatant, defiant, like he was testing me, seeing if I'd back down after my sister's visit, seeing if I was serious. I printed a second violation notice. This one came with an escalation. Second violation of reserved parking. Vehicle will be towed if found in this space again. Owner responsible for all towing and storage fees. Colton read the second notice slowly. I watched from my window as he stood in the parking lot, the paper in his hands, his expression changing. Then he looked up toward my apartment. Found my window, made direct eye contact. "You wouldn't dare," he mouthed. Even from 2 floors up, I could read his lips clearly. I didn't answer. Didn't react, just stepped back from the window and let the curtain fall closed. But inside, my hands were shaking. Because he was right to question whether I'd actually follow through. Towing his car would escalate everything. Would turn this from a family disagreement into an actual confrontation. Would force me to choose between keeping the peace and enforcing boundaries. Dad had always chosen peace. Always found compromise. Always avoided conflict when he could. But Dad had also painted my name on that parking space. Had made me building manager. Had believed I could handle the responsibility. I just had to trust that I could actually do it. That night, I called the towing company Dad had a contract with. Asked about their procedures, their rates, their response time. "We can be there in 30 minutes for authorized tows," the dispatcher said. "Just need your confirmation that it's your property and the vehicle is violating posted rules." "How much does it cost to get the car back?" I asked. "Base fee is $250, plus $50 per day storage if they don't pick it up immediately." I thanked her and hung up. Sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at nothing. $250. Plus storage. Plus the humiliation of having to retrieve your vehicle from an impound lot. 2 tenants approached me the next day, Mrs. Kowalski and Mr. Allen, both looking uncomfortable. "We heard something," Mrs. Kowalski said gently. "Colton mentioned that the building might be sold, that the family is considering offers." My heart dropped. "What?" Mr. Allen shifted his weight. He said it casually, like it was already decided. "We just wanted to know if we should start looking for new places." "The building is not being sold," I said firmly. "I don't know why Colton would say that, but it's not true." They looked relieved but uncertain, like they weren't sure who to believe. After they left, I went back to the office and started going through files more carefully. Looking for anything that might explain Colton's confidence. Any documents he might have seen that made him think he had authority here. That's when I found them. The unpaid utility charges, water bills, parking fines from the city for blocking the alley during a delivery. Maintenance charges for repairs to their unit that should have been covered by tenant insurance. all unpaid, all accumulating, all adding up to far more than the rent they already owed. I pulled out a calculator and added everything up. Rent, utilities, fines, repairs. $4,870, nearly $5,000 that Colton and my sister owed the building. And according to the lease agreement, the one my sister had signed, the one that applied even to family, there was a clause. Clear and specific. Unpaid balances exceeding 2 months' rent constitute grounds for lease termination. Outstanding debts must be paid in full before termination is withdrawn. I checked the calendar. Today was the 28th. End of month was in 2 days. I printed an official notice, not a friendly reminder, not a casual mention. An official 30-day notice to pay or vacate. Total outstanding balance, $4,870. Payment must be received by midnight on the 30th or lease termination proceedings will begin. I listed every charge, every late fee, every unpaid bill. Made it official. Gave them 2 days to come up with nearly $5,000 or face eviction proceedings. My hands shook as I printed it. This wasn't about a parking space anymore. This was about the building's survival. About my ability to actually manage this property, instead of just pretending to. I walked it to their door that afternoon when I knew they'd be home. Knocked. Colton answered. Saw the envelope in my hand. What's this? Official notice, I said, keeping my voice level. Payment due by end of month. He took it. Read it. His expression shifted through several emotions. Surprise, anger, dismissal. You're kidding. No. My sister appeared behind him. What's going on? Colton showed her the notice. I watched her face go pale as she read the total. We can't pay this by Friday, she said. That's 2 days from now. The lease specifies end of month for outstanding balances, I replied. That's the 31st. You have until midnight. Colton's laugh was sharp, disbelieving. You really think we're going to come up with $5,000 in 2 days? I think you're going to pay what you owe, or face the consequences outlined in your lease agreement. He stepped closer, towering over me, using his height to intimidate. You won't do it, Paige. You don't have the spine. My sister shook her head, her voice pleading now. This is ridiculous. We're family. We can work something out, a payment plan or something. I offered to discuss payment arrangements 3 months ago, I said quietly. When the first month's rent was late, you said you'd take care of it soon. That was 3 months ago. We've been having money issues, she said. You know that. Then you should have talked to me about it. Instead, Colton's been telling tenants he runs the building, parking in my reserved space, acting like he owns the place. Colton's face flushed. Because you clearly can't handle it. This building needs real management. It has real management, I said. Me, as designated in our father's will, and real management means enforcing lease terms, including payment requirements. I turned to leave. Stopped at their door. End of month, midnight. If the balance isn't paid, enforcement begins. That night, Colton's SUV sat in my spot, right in the middle of my painted name. Like a challenge, like a dare. Like he was saying, you won't actually do anything. I looked at it from my apartment window, felt the familiar frustration rising, the anger, the humiliation of seeing my father's gift to me used as a weapon against me. But underneath that, something harder. Colder. More resolved. I'd given them the deadline. I'd been clear about the consequences. Now I just had to wait. And see if they believed I'd actually follow through. The days crawled by, 48 hours feeling like 48 weeks. Colton kept parking in my spot. Every single day. Like he was daring me to act. Like he knew I wouldn't. Every time I saw that SUV, the humiliation burned a little deeper. Every time I parked 3 blocks away and walked past my own name painted on the curb, something inside me hardened. But I didn't argue anymore. Didn't leave more notices. Didn't engage. I waited. Checked my bank account obsessively. The building account where rent payments were supposed to deposit. Watched for any sign that they were taking this seriously. Nothing came. No payment. No phone call asking to discuss terms. No acknowledgement that the deadline was real. Mrs. Kowalski stopped me in the hallway the day before the deadline. Dear, are you all right? You look stressed. Just dealing with some building management issues, I said. She patted my arm. Your father would be proud of you. I know this hasn't been easy since he passed. The words nearly broke me, because I wasn't sure if Dad would be proud. He'd always chosen peace over conflict, always found ways to compromise. But he'd also taught me that sometimes the loving thing is to enforce boundaries, that enabling bad behavior isn't kindness. I just hoped I was remembering the right lesson. The 30th arrived, my last day of work before the weekend. I could barely focus, kept checking my phone, kept refreshing the bank account, still nothing. Midnight arrived. End of the 30th. I sat at my kitchen table watching the clock on my laptop, 11:47 p.m., no payment. 11:52 p.m., still nothing. 11:58 p.m., my phone sat next to the laptop, the towing company's number already pulled up, ready to call. 12 a.m., midnight, first of the month. Payment deadline passed. 12:01 a.m., official deadline violation. My hand hovered over my phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it. The moment where I either backed down or followed through. I looked out my window. Colton's SUV sat in my spot, illuminated by the parking lot lights, crooked across my father's carefully painted letters. I picked up my phone and dialed. Precision Towing, how can I help you? My voice came out steadier than I expected. I need to authorize a tow. Unauthorized vehicle in a reserved spot. Address? I gave it. We can have a truck there in 20 minutes. You'll need to meet the driver to authorize. I'll be there. I hung up. Sat there for a moment, let the reality of what I'd just done wash over me. Then I put on my shoes and went downstairs to wait. The tow truck arrived quietly, no sirens, no drama, just a large flatbed truck pulling into the parking lot at 12:23 a.m. The driver got out, checked his paperwork, looked at me. You the property manager? Yes. This the vehicle? He pointed to Colton's SUV. Yes, that's a reserved space. Tenant has been warned multiple times. He walked around the SUV taking photos, standard procedure, documenting everything. Authorized? He asked. Yes. He nodded and started setting up the chains. The mechanical sound of the tow equipment seemed impossibly loud in the quiet night. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. But I stood there watching. This was happening. I was actually doing this. The chains tightened around the wheels. The truck's hydraulics hummed. Then the lights came on in Colton and my sister's apartment. 3rd floor. Corner unit. A window opened. Colton's head appeared. His eyes found the tow truck. Found his SUV. Found me standing there in the parking lot. What the hell are you doing? He shouted down. I didn't answer, just watched as he disappeared from the window. 30 seconds later, he burst out of the building entrance. Running, his face red with anger and something else. Fear. Real fear that this was actually happening. Stop the truck! Colton shouted, running toward us. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, no shoes, must have just been going to bed. I stayed calm. Kept my voice level. Enforcing the lease agreement. Your payment deadline passed. My sister appeared in the doorway behind him, her face pale in the parking lot lights. Paige, what are you doing? Towing an unauthorized vehicle from a reserved space, as stated in the violation notices. Colton turned to the tow truck driver. You can't do this. That's my car. The driver looked at me. Ma'am, is this your property? Are you authorizing this tow? Yes, I said clearly. The driver shrugged at Colton. Then we're legal. Property owner authorization. Stop the truck right now. Colton's voice was rising toward hysteria. The arrogance completely gone. Paige, you can't do this. Pay your balance, I said evenly. The lease terms were clear. His face went from red to pale. You're bluffing. This is just to scare us. I pulled out the folder I'd brought with me, the one with all the documentation, held it up so he could see the official building letterhead. You owe $4,870. Payment was due by midnight tonight. It's now 12:28 a.m. The lease agreement allows enforcement for unpaid balances. Colton's mouth opened. Closed. He looked genuinely shocked that I was serious. The tow truck lifted the front wheels of the SUV off the ground. The mechanical sound was final, irreversible. Colton's panic became fully visible. Hold on, just hold on a second. His voice cracked. We can pay tomorrow, first thing in the morning. Payment deadline was midnight, I repeated calmly. Please, my sister said, her voice smaller now, desperate. We just need one more day. We can get the money. You've had 3 months, I said. Multiple notices, multiple warnings. This is the consequence of ignoring all of them. Colton ran his hands through his hair. looked around like someone might appear to help him, looked at the small crowd of tenants who'd emerged from their apartments to watch. Mrs. Kowalski stood on her balcony in a bathrobe. Mr. Allen was in his doorway. 3 other tenants scattered around, all watching, all seeing Colton's control shatter in real time. "You're really doing this?" Colton's voice dropped, became quieter, almost pleading. "Over a parking space?" "Over respect," I corrected. "Over honoring the rules my father established. Over running this building properly instead of letting someone undermine my authority." The tow truck driver finished securing the SUV. "We're good to go," he called to me. I nodded. Colton took a step toward me. "Where are you taking it?" The driver handed me a card. "Impound lot on Industrial Boulevard. He can pick it up any time after paying the towing fee and storage charges." "How much?" Colton demanded. "Base towing is $250. Storage is $50 a day." The driver climbed back into his truck. I held up the paperwork so Colton could see it clearly. The lease agreement, the payment notice, the total balance. $4,870, I said, each word deliberate, clear. "That's what you owe the building, plus now the towing fees." Colton's face did something I'd never seen before. The cocky confidence draining away completely, leaving behind something small and desperate. "You're seriously doing this?" His voice had dropped to almost a whisper. "You're really going to destroy this family over money?" "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed respect the moment you parked in my father's space and told tenants you ran this building. This is just me protecting what he built." My sister stepped between us, tears in her eyes now. "You're destroying this family," she said. "Dad would hate this. He would hate you acting like this." That stung. But I held my ground. "Dad would hate that you're living rent-free while the building struggles to pay its bills. He would hate that Colton undermined me to the tenants. He would hate that you took advantage of my grief." The tow truck's engine rumbled. The driver shifted into gear. Silence fell across the parking lot. Even the night sounds seemed to pause. Every tenant was watching. Every window had faces in it. This wasn't private anymore. This was public, a statement. And suddenly, everyone was looking at me differently. Not with pity, not with sympathy, with respect. The tow truck pulled away, with Colton's SUV chained to the flatbed, red taillights disappearing around the corner. My sister stood there crying. Colton stood there in his bare feet looking lost. Neither of them spoke to me. They just turned and walked back inside. My sister's shoulders shaking, Colton's hand on her back. Both of them smaller somehow. The tenants slowly disappeared back into their apartments. Mrs. Kowalski gave me a small nod before closing her door. Mr. Allen caught my eye and nodded too. I stood in the empty parking lot, my parking space finally empty. The white letters of my name visible again under the streetlight. I felt exhausted, wrung out, but also lighter somehow. Like I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't fully recognized until I set it down. The next 2 days were quiet. No knock on my door. No phone calls, nothing. I checked the building account obsessively, watched for any sign of payment. On the 3rd day, there was a knock. I opened my door to find Colton standing there. Alone, no swagger, no smile. "I have the money," he said. His voice was flat, defeated. I gestured to the office downstairs. "Let's do it officially." We went to Dad's office. I pulled up the account ledger. Colton pulled out his phone and made a bank transfer. I watched the payment process. Watched the full balance clear, $4,870, plus the $250 for towing that he'd already paid to get his SUV back. I printed a receipt, signed it, dated it, made it official. Colton took the receipt without looking at it, started to leave, then stopped at the door. Colton turned back, his hand still on the doorframe. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 3 days. The cocky confidence completely gone. "Can I?" He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Can I park in the lot again?" The question was so different from everything that had come before. No demands, no assumptions, just asking. Actually asking permission. I pointed to the wall where Dad's parking chart hung, the laminated map showing all 12 spots. "You can park in visitor spaces. Guest parking is those 3 spots by the dumpster." Those spots were the furthest from the building entrance. No overhead cover. Right next to where the trash trucks came. Colton looked at the map, looked at those 3 distant spots, then looked at my reserved space right by the door. "Not in your spot?" It wasn't quite a question, more like confirmation of what he already knew. I pointed to the white letters painted on the curb. Reserved, Paige Whitaker, he nodded slowly. Right? My sister appeared in the doorway behind him. She looked worse than he did, eyes red from crying, face pale, wearing the same clothes as 3 days ago. Can we talk? She asked quietly. Colton squeezed her shoulder and left. Gave us privacy. My sister came in and closed the door. I'm sorry, she said. Not for asking you to bend the rules, but for not taking you seriously when you said no. I sat back in Dad's chair. You thought I wouldn't follow through? Yes, she admitted. I thought you'd cave, like you always do. Like I always did, I corrected. Past tense. She nodded slowly. The building? It really matters to you, doesn't it? It's all I have left of Dad, I said simply. The last thing he built. The last thing he trusted me with. I can't let it fall apart 'cause I'm too afraid to enforce basic rules. My sister sat down across from me. Colton's moving out. I'm staying, but I'll pay full rent on time. I'll sign whatever agreement you need. You already have a lease, I said. Just follow it. I will. She paused. I really am sorry, Paige, about the parking space especially. I knew how much it meant to you. I didn't care, because Colton didn't care, and I was following his lead. Why? I asked. Why let him speak for you? She looked away. Because he was confident when I was scared. After Dad died, everything felt uncertain. Colton acted like he had all the answers. It was easier to let him take charge. Even when he was wrong? Especially when he was wrong, she admitted. Because then I didn't have to be responsible for the decisions. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. How easy it was to let someone else make the hard choices. To avoid conflict by just going along. Are you and Colin? I asked. Yeah. She smiled sadly. Turns out when someone loses their swagger, you see who they really are. And Colton without confidence is just mean and small. She stood up, stopped at the door like Colton had. The tenants respect you now. All of them. They see you differently. Because I towed a car, I asked. Because you set a boundary and kept it, she corrected. Because you stopped being a pushover. Months later, the parking lot looked the same. Same asphalt, same painted lines, same 12 spaces outlined in fading white paint. But one thing had changed. One space stayed perpetually empty unless I was there. The one with Paige Whitaker, painted in careful white letters. The one my father had designated for me 2 weeks before his heart attack. No one parked there anymore. Not Colton, who'd moved out a month after the towing incident. Not visiting friends. Not delivery drivers. Not even my sister on the rare occasions she borrowed my car. Not because they were afraid of me now. Not because I'd become some tyrant landlord who terrorized her tenants. Because they respected me. Respected the space. Respected the boundary I'd set and defended. Mrs. Kowalski brought me cookies one afternoon. Your father would be proud, she said. Not of the conflict, but of you finding your strength. I'm not sure Dad would have handled it the same way, I admitted. No, she agreed. Your father kept the peace. But sometimes peace comes at too high a cost. Sometimes it means letting people take advantage. You found a different way. The building ran smoother now. Tenants paid on time. Maintenance requests came to me. No one questioned who was in charge. My sister and I rebuilt our relationship slowly. Coffee once a week. Honest conversations. She paid her rent on the first every month. Never asked for special treatment. I stood in the parking lot one evening, 6 months after the towing. Looking at my father's careful white letters. Still visible. Still clear. And I realized something he probably knew all along. People will test your boundaries until you enforce them. They'll push to see what you'll allow. Take what you don't defend. Assume you're weak if you choose kindness, until the moment you prove otherwise. Until you set a line and hold it. For me, that moment was a tow truck at midnight. Chains around tires. Red taillights disappearing around a corner. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a quiet choice to stop accepting disrespect. The parking space was never really about parking. It was about honoring my father's gift, about protecting what he'd built, about proving I could handle the responsibility he'd left me. He took my reserved spot every day, until I took his car as collateral. And in doing so, I found something more valuable than a parking space. I found my backbone.